Hi. I'm Dennis. I'm a recovering Californian. We've been here now. We're just so delighted to be living in Florida. We moved, my wife Diana and I moved here in September. I'll tell you more about that adventure, but first I wanted to see if I could get an acknowledgement. I learned finally how to dress like a Floridian. By the way, you know where I found this shirt? Over at Encore 2. When I got to Florida, I said, you know, I need to look like a Floridian. I went over there, and there it is. And so if this looked familiar to somebody out there, it's because you probably wore it sometime. so I'm so pleased to be here. So my lesson title, and I asked him to put it up on the screen because I'm going to refer to it throughout our talk today. The lesson title is Remembering the Way Home is What Matters. And what supports what I want to talk to you about today is the quote underneath by Dr. Ernest Holmes. He writes, "Nothing can bring peace but the revelation of the individual to himself and in recognition of his direct relationship to the universe." Yeah? So for me, the key words here are obviously peace and revelation and oneness with the universe. Well, I think that at the end of the day, you'd probably all agree, and if you feel like giving me a hallelujah when you agree, you can do that. We're all, at the end of the day, what we're really searching for, what we seek mostly in our life, is that deep inner peace that passes all understanding. Can I get a witness? Okay. You don't have to do that the whole service. Don't do that. And the problem is, the challenge is, the further we get from our awareness of our oneness with God, with life, the universe, it, whatever you want to refer to it as, the further we get on the quest, this quest for peace will take us one of two ways. Either out into the world, where we seek peace and we think that when we acquire enough, when we reach a certain point, when we have achieved enough, or when we have gone as far as we can go in the human condition, we'll arrive at a place called happiness, and then we can breathe and be at peace. Okay. Of course, the other way, the other journey is to travel to that inner place within and dwell in our oneness with God, with life, the universe. Yeah? Yeah. So here's the message here that I want to talk to you about today, and it's in the form of one of the great master teacher, Jesus' parables. I believe Jesus was the greatest spiritual psychologist ever. Okay, you can stop that, okay? No, that's okay if you want to, but the way that he taught was by virtue of parables. A parable is a story that has metaphor and idioms attached to it that teach a message, that give a message. You see, he knew in his day and time, he wasn't speaking to highly educated people. And so parables were simple stories that they could embrace and get the meaning behind. And I think perhaps the most profound parable is my favorite in the entire scriptures, and I think that the greatest parable the teacher ever taught was the parable of the prodigal son. It is such a profound story. What I'm going to do is give it to you in a very short order, just the facts of the story, then we're going to go back and review what it means. Once there was a man who had two sons. And the one son, the younger son, comes to his father and says, "Dad, I'd like you to give me my inheritance now." I'm going to put this in my own language so it's a little more contemporary, okay? He says, "Pop, give me my money now, my inheritance, so I'm being called by the world. I want to go and spend that money and have fun in the world." So the father doesn't argue. He gives him his inheritance and just steps back and lets his son have his way. A couple days later, the son packs up and goes to what Jesus refers to as the far country. The far country. And there he spends his money rather quickly on riotous living. Now, that reminds me of my college days, frankly, but what riotous living means that he went through his money quickly on not good investments, okay? And one day, when he ran out of the coin of the realm, the money, there became a famine in the land, which is a great metaphor for what happens to us when we mentally lose our material aspects of life. And he became so destitute that he goes and finds a job on a farm working in the pig pen, mucking the pig manure. So destitute that he had no food, that he would eat the food of the swine. So he's sitting there eating the food of the swine one day, and he's kind of feeling like down and out, and something happens to him. An idea comes to him. He says, wait a minute. Even the servants back on Dad's farm have got it better than this. I think what I'm going to do is rise and go back home and ask for his forgiveness and just ask for a job on the farm. So with that, he rises and leaves. His father sees him coming from the distance, runs up to him, hugs him, kisses him on the neck, it says, and embraces him. And before the son could get on with his apologies and whatnot, the father embraces him and says, my son who was dead has come back to life. And then the father tells the servants, get the best robe we have, get a ring, put it on his finger, put shoes on his feet, kill the fatted calf. It's time to celebrate. My son has returned. Now there's more to the story than that, but that's the part I want to talk to you about at this time. What does the Father metaphorically represent? The Father obviously represents God. Yeah? Or whatever your idea of what God is, infinite presence. That's what the metaphor is. Now, in his day, in Aramaic, which he spoke, Father, he referred to God as Abba. Abba. That's Aramaic. What that means is daddy or papa. It's a very intimate term for father. Jesus knew that the Semitic people in those days had an intense love for their family, for their father. And so he was imparting this, conveying this relationship with God in a way that they would get it and embrace it. And notice that the Father, God, when he gave the Son the inheritance, didn't lay a trip on him, didn't put a guilt trip on him, didn't say, you might be better off if you invest this in T-bills or he didn't do any trip on him. He just gave him the money. Unconditional love. Here it is. You asked for it. That's the Father. That's the universe. That's God. Now, what does the prodigal son represent? The prodigal son represents that human aspect within us, ego self. I call it mini-me. Okay? That place that identifies with the material world, that thinks that the reality that we draw from is out there. That part of us, the prodigal son, believes that there is better than here. And that when I get there, it'll be better than here. That part of ourselves believes that then, one day, soon, is better than now. That part of us that gets on what is known as the hedonic treadmill, that's always on a quest for something next, thinking that when we arrive at that place, it'll be enough. But we know before we even get there, it's not. So we're more. There's more, there's more, there's more. That's the call of the prodigal son, the far country. The prodigal son confused his wants with his needs. We have very few needs, but man, are we addicted to our wants. You read Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs and you'll discover it. We have needs like water, shelter, love, but the rest of it is wants. And the wants are generally, when we're addicted to them, they call us to the far country. How are you breathing? So the prodigal son is addicted to external power, confuses the wants with the needs. Now, what do you think the far country represents? The far country is anything that separates us from the awareness of God's presence. Anything. Not just the material world, not just the things that we quest for that cause us to go unconscious and forget our relationship with the divine, but the daily human dramas that we experience as well. Perhaps it's a health condition. Perhaps it's a relationship issue. We go unconscious and we forget about the about the presence, and we innately go to the far country. That we enter that sense of separation from God. I want to share with you, transparency here. I've been in the far country recently for the last 9 months. My wife and I, Diane, moved here in September. And so the far country, don't take this personally, but at that point the far country was Florida. We moved from California, sold the house, got here, rented an apartment, finally found a house, bought a house, dealing with contractors, and blah, 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 blah. All the things that are related to living on the material plane. Then, in December, my dad falls while he's walking, has a brain injury, and passes away 3 months later in March. Meanwhile, for these 5-6 months between December and now, I've been flying back to California every month. I'm on my 5th trip now, okay? And I went back last week. And I'm telling you this because this is a great excuse why I was in the far country. And I forgot about my practices. I fell out of grace with myself, capital S. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I went back and performed my dad's memorial service. 95 years old. Amazing life. The next week, last Saturday, I performed my daughter's wedding ceremony. This process of the circle of life, 3 firsts for me in the last 2 weeks. I buried my dad, which I'd never done before. I've never done a memorial service for a parent. I married my daughter. I've never done a wedding for my daughter, any of my children. And I performed for my daughter my very first in 31 years same-sex marriage. And all it's not because I didn't want to, it's because in Simi Valley, if you've ever been there, it's not a real diverse community. Okay? Well, I don't want to go on, but my point is this, that the far country for me in the last 9 months contained all those things, and they're pretty damn good excuses, darn good excuses, aren't they? Yeah? They're good excuses for forgetting, going unconscious, but, and here's the crux of this entire story. Excuse me. The far country is whatever calls us to put our relationship with the world before our relationship with God. Not all things in the far country are bad. And this is the point of the prodigal son. Here is the moral of the story. While the prodigal son is sitting there eating the husks of the swine, feeling sorry for himself, he has an awareness. And he says, I will rise and go back home and ask my father for forgiveness. That's a metaphor. Metaphysically, to rise means I'm having a shift in consciousness. And I'm going to return back to that place from which I came. He remembered who he was. Wait a minute. I am the son of the beloved. And I will return. And he returns, and the father sees him coming, and before he can get the words out of his mouth about how sorry he is that he did all these things, his father throws himself around his son, kisses him on the neck, holds him, and turns to the servant and says, my son, who was dead, is now returned. Get the ring, put it on his finger, kill the fatted calf, put the robe on, the seamless robe on him. These are all metaphors, biblically speaking, for royalty, for what is given to us when, metaphorically, when we are in the loving embrace of the one. Yes? Okay, so here's the takeaway. I do mentoring with people who want to learn how to write or do public speaking. And I say, you gotta give them the takeaway at the end. If you don't give them the takeaway, it's for naught. And here's the takeaway. You ready? If you are not as close to God as you once were, who moved? This is the story and the metaphor of the prodigal son. He remembered his way home. He remembered who he was, and he returned home. If you find yourself in the far country, it's never too late to rise in consciousness. Remember who you are, a beloved aspect of the one, and come home. It's never too late, because you are loved unconditionally, without conditions. But wait, there's more. There's more to the story. So the father and the son are inside partying down, having a great time. The second son, who was out in the field pulling weeds or something, hears what's going on. He rushes up to the house and he says to the servants, "What's going on here?" And the servant says, "Well, your brother who was gone has returned. And your father has given him the seamless robe and the ring, and they killed the fatted calf, and they're having a celebration of his return." And you know what the brother does? The stay-at-home son? He goes, "That's not fair!" And he starts ranting and pouting. Father hears what's going on. The father comes out to the son, the other son. And the son downloads to him with all this stuff. And you know what his father says? He puts his arm on this father puts his arm on the son of the shoulder. And he says, "Son, dang, we're out of time. Part 2, next week." The title is Claiming Your Divine Inheritance, Going from Gratitude and Beyond. I will see you then. Namaste.